I believe that we can all manifest our dreams, and it's because of the power that we're connected to. Peace. Assalamu alaikum. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Tea Time Podcast. It is my pleasure to announce the reformat and reintroduction again of Tea Time Podcast, now by Atiya J. This is a self-help spiritual podcast that will touch on topics we love to avoid but definitely need to conquer. Tea time is your moment to pause, listen, and absorb what is soothing to you. If you didn't know, I'm Atiya J, aka Tia, aka TT, and this was sparked by my passion to help you help others to discover their latent potential, purpose, and significance, especially when they feel forgotten, alone, or overlooked. I want you to know that you're not alone, you're not forgotten, and I see you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's get into the topic. Today, I really wanted to discuss something that may be a little uncomfortable, and I'm going to try to jump right into it and be uncomfortable by sharing bits of myself. Today's topic is about vulnerability, and we're going to connect vulnerability, what it is, what it isn't, with joy, and how being more vulnerable can actually give us a more enjoyable life and help us to live our most authentic and genuine selves. So let's get into it. Today's objective is to present ideas about vulnerability that may seem opposite of what we generally understand about it, using research from Dr. Brené Brown, who is an award-winning author and research psychologist. I'm also going to go into some personal stories, and we're going to discuss a hot topic in the media that might, I think, pretty much relates completely to what we're going to discuss. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with a story, right? When I think about when I was younger, I think it was about 7th grade. I think it was around 13 years old, right? I lived in Staten Island, New York again. Just moved back, and we had this it was a pretty big house, like definitely bigger than what we experienced before in terms of the yard we had, as well as the space inside the house. And this house was completely disgusting when we moved in because the previous owner had died, and I don't think she took care of it or something. I don't know. But my mom and my grandmother worked hard to completely gut the house, and they renovated it, and it was beautiful after. Freshly painted walls, fresh floors, fresh everything. It had this wonderful fireplace that separated the living room from the office. You could walk in, you go to the kitchen. We had a backyard with a big pool, in-ground pool, which was pretty awesome. And I used to love to swim, but I honestly can't even remember being in that pool too much, because when I was at that age, I spent all of my time in my bedroom. I remember you would go upstairs, go to the right, there was the bathroom ahead of you, and to the right of that was my bedroom. And I remember it was like lilac, lavender walls in there that my mom allowed me to pick out the color for, and she painted. And the room was pretty awesome. I got nice sunlight from the backyard that would come in, and I would sit in that room all of the time with my headphones on, listening to my iPod. I think I started with the CD player, and I would just sit there, listen to sad songs, Eminem, Cleaning Out My Closet, Eminem, Stan, one of my favorites, some of my favorites at that time, Alicia Keys, Diary of Alicia Keys album that would put me into my feelings, and I just cried. But it was great. I loved it. Like, that was amazing to me. But that's how I spent that 1 year that we lived in that house. A lot of that time was spent doing that. I don't even remember my mom or my sister's bedroom because I don't think I spent that much time in there, to be honest. And in those moments when I think back on it, they're pretty sad. I was feeling really lonely at the time. I felt like my family did not understand me. I felt that everything I did was supposedly an attitude. I felt like I couldn't be free like my friends were at school. I felt like I really didn't have any friends because we kept moving. I was pissed off, y'all. I was pissed off. But in those moments that I sat in my bedroom, staring at the walls, staring at the ceiling, listening to my music until I fell asleep, that was so relieving and so freeing to me. Perhaps what I experienced was actually relieving because I was able to be vulnerable. In the podcast episode I listened to of Super Soul Conversations by Oprah, she sat with Dr. Brené Brown, who is an award-winning author, lecturer, and TED Talk extraordinaire and research psychologist. She has done extensive research into joy, living wholeheartedly, and vulnerability. And what she says is that our understanding of vulnerability in society is misinformed. And when we lean into vulnerability, we can live a more joyful and fulfilling life. Perhaps in those little moments as a little girl, I was living my most enjoyed and fulfilling life because I was completely vulnerable to my emotions, to myself, and to what was happening around me. And I was just being authentic and genuine. How can we do this not only alone in our room, but how can we do this more efficiently in our everyday life and in every relationship that we have? Let's look into it, right? So Dr. Brené Brown, in her conversation with Oprah, said some pretty striking things that I wanted to highlight. And before we get into that, let's start with just the definition of vulnerability. I want you to stop for a moment and think about vulnerability and how that word makes you feel. When I say that you are vulnerable, how are you feeling? When I say that you look pretty vulnerable right now, how are you feeling? If you feel at all kind of afraid, if you feel offended that I would use that word and to give it to you, I think this is our general societal understanding of vulnerability, that to be vulnerable is to be weak. Let's look at the actual definition of vulnerability. This is from Merriam-Webster's online dictionary. It says vulnerability means to be capable of being physically or emotionally wounded, open to attack or damage. Its synonyms are exposed, sensitive, and susceptible. That's a pretty loaded definition. However, I want to point out that nowhere in that definition does it say weak. Not at all. So why is it that we, as people and within this society, why is it that we equate vulnerability with weakness? Brené Brown discusses how there is this idea in our culture that things are scarce, right? There's this scarcity culture that we live by, and we're taught from the time that we are babies that if we are not the first to go to retrieve something or to get something, that it will no longer be there to retrieve. We see this on social media every day, right? I struggle with issues of, jealousy and envy, looking at people who seem to have everything together. This person may have started later than me, but somehow they're doing great in their business, And there's this idea that because that person has what I'm looking for, I can no longer get it. I can no longer be it. And it's that external kind of movement. We're allowing things that are outside of us to control how we are feeling internally, right? So this scarcity culture that we have pushes us further and further away from vulnerability until we are numb to it, right? Early bird catches the worm. That's something that we are taught in school. So some may say that, okay, I'm numb to vulnerability. That just means I'm not going to be a crybaby. That just means I'm not going to be all caught up in my emotions all the time. Well, Brené Brown discusses how Yeah, you can numb vulnerability if you would like to, but guess what? You also numb joy. You cannot, as a human being, decide to numb one type of emotion without numbing the other, right? So if I'm going to decide to numb myself when I'm feeling emotionally hurt, or when I'm feeling sad, or when I feel like I need to reach out for help, if I'm going to be numb to that, then that means I'm also going to be numb to when I'm really enjoying the vacation that I finally got on. I'm also going to be numb to seeing my child walk for the first time, right? We're not going to be able to enjoy life and its special moments as much if we don't allow ourselves to be susceptible to those feelings that may not be as pleasurable to us. Example, Brené Brown tells a story of when she was surveying a man and he was married for 60 years. And he said that he never allowed himself to get too excited in special moments because he felt that if he got too excited, then there was opportunity for him to be let down very hard. Well, this man, after 60 years of marriage with his wife, lost his wife in a tragic car accident. And the first thing that he thought about was, I wish I had leaned into those moments of joy a little more, because nothing can protect me from the feelings that I'm feeling now. He said nothing was going to stop me from feeling this grief. And I think that's pretty powerful and that's pretty wise to just reflect on the fact that we can try to protect ourselves if we want to. However, if we're numb to the joy and to the good times, then we're going to end up being, if we're numb to the bad times, we're going to end up being numb to the good times. And you cannot you cannot get any of those moments back. So if you're not present with something that can be potentially bad, you're not going to be present with something that's potentially good. And at the end of the day, you missed out on both of those moments. What is critical about accepting vulnerability, being more open and exposed, is you're able to let your emotions flow. You're able to say what is on your mind. You're able to act on what is within your heart. And you're able to be honest with yourself and other people. This leads to wholehearted living. Dr. Brené Brown went into the definition of courage, the original definition of courage. And I think it's just such a beautiful definition. I'll let you listen into it and her synopsis.
You talk about the original definition of courage. Can you share that?
Yeah.
I love that.
I do too. It's from the Latin word cur, meaning heart.
Uh-huh.
And so the original definition was to share all of yourself, share your whole story with your whole heart. So an act of courage was an act of storytelling, which I think is true.
With that definition of courage, telling your whole story with your whole heart, it's clear why vulnerability is so closely connected with joy and wholehearted living, right? I want to pick up an example that's pretty hot in the media now. Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith and their lovely marriage, right? So everybody keeps coming at Jada saying she's disrespecting Will. She is insane about what she's saying about Will and making him look like a simp or making him look weak because of what she's saying on her show, The Red Table Talk. First of all, I'm an actual fan of The Red Table Talk from the beginning. I've watched every single episode except for this most recent one that is sparking controversy, and maybe a couple others that I wasn't very interested in. However, The Red Table Talk, its premise is about her being vulnerable, her being open and raw about what's going on in her life. And she invites other people to join her on the show and do the same. This has opened up topics such as a blended family, where she had a conversation with Will's ex-wife about what that was when she came into Will Smith's life and when she came into Will Smith's son's life as well, that she has now taken on as her son. She talks about the love that she still has for Tupac. She talks about the health and mental health issues of her entire family, Will Smith included in that conversation. And as we know, she also shared her entanglement with Will Smith, with her husband on the show as well, which kind of brought everyone else in on the conversation who did not necessarily watch the show from the beginning, right? So in a recent episode, she discusses sex life, right, within marriage and how the sex life develops and changes. And she discussed how hers developed and how she had some kind of pitfalls in her thinking with Will about what sex is within a marriage. And they worked through that throughout their marriage and as they matured through this past 26 years. And everybody took that and ran with it. This woman was being strong by being vulnerable and open about a sexual relationship and marriage. And people took that and called her weak, called her crazy, called Will weak, called Will insane to put up with Jada, when she was sharing an actual realistic conversation that every couple has or needs to have, right? So this society that we live in likes to twist vulnerability into weakness, when vulnerability is actually an open communication, honesty, being yourself, and is something that can actually help other people to realize you are not the only one. You're not alone. You're not forgotten. You are not the only one discussing this. And if I can be stronger and more vulnerable in discussing it, perhaps you can be strong and more vulnerable as well. That's not to say I'm going to get out on a huge platform and discuss very intimately all of the things within my marriage and within my family. However, she lives a lifestyle where her entire life is in the public. So I can understand why she would want to just take that into her own hands and begin to talk before rumors get spread about what's happening in her life. That leads me to wanting to share this story from Brené Brown's talk with Oprah as well. So listen to this.
I love this quote that you say here, that it is the key to having meaningful human experiences. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. When I look at my husband and we're on the verge of a fight,
Yeah.
and I say, let's stop, because I'm making up this story about what's happening right now. And it's that you don't think I look cute, or that you're disappointed in something. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I say, no, I love you, and I'm in fear right now, and I'm feeling dangerous. And he says, I'm in some fear right now too, and I'm feeling like I'm shutting down. Like, those are the moments.
Whoa.
Yeah. As opposed to what I would normally do, which would be, anger and blame are my go-to places.
Yeah. And doesn't vulnerability open the door to having greater intimacy?
I think it's the only door.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
I think it's the only door.
That there is no intimacy where there isn't vulnerability.
You would be shocked how many people, when we asked them, what is vulnerability, how many people said, initiating sex with my wife.
Wow. Yeah, I would be shocked.
Initiating sex with my husband.
Because they feel like they're going to be turned down,
Yes.
rejected.
And it didn't matter whether they were married for 5 minutes or 15 years.
Wow.
That, but think about this. We wake up in the morning, we armor up, we go out into the world with this, hey, take no prisoners, you're not going to see me, you're not going to hurt me. We come home and we don't take that armor off.
Mm-hmm.
And so then all of a sudden, when you talk about sex or intimacy, you get in bed and all of a sudden, it's like two people in big honking armor outfits.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work.
I think that being open is what allows you the confidence to know that everybody else has also felt the same thing. That
That's
there's
the truth.
no emotion that you can have that somebody else hasn't had.
Ever.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I just want to share a story that's very similar to what Dr. Brené Brown just shared about her and her husband. A couple weeks ago, me and my husband, we got into some discussion, argument, and it was not going in a positive direction. And he said something, and it made me want to stop, right? I was feeling angry. I was feeling neglected. I felt like my feelings were not being heard. However, he said something that made me want to stop, reflect, and connect with his soul rather than connect with what we were saying. And instead of arguing back, I decided to stop and just apologize. That's all I felt like I could do in that moment. So I just apologized, gave him a hug, and it made him pause and stop as well. And similarly to Brené Brown's story, we in that moment shared a space of vulnerability. We shared a space of genuity together. And because of that, the very next day, I got a nice little surprise date, and we went out to a comedy club, dropped the baby off, and had a very enjoyable night. And I believe we were just radiating a connection that was not enticing, that's not the word, but we were radiating a connection that was attractive to other people, because even the comedians were joking about us, but they were joking saying how adorable and how much of a power couple we look like. And I believe that's the spirit that we were walking in that day, because we were coming from this place of full, complete wholeheartedness with each other, because we put that front away for just a few seconds. We put that front away, and we weren't so caught up in protecting our ego and protecting ourselves, but we decided to let that skin shed a bit and just be raw, be our soul, be our spirit, instead of this front and shield and protection that we put up, that we were taught to put up by society. So I wanted to share that story just to show that I'm trying to practice a bit at being vulnerable as well. And I wanted to end off this podcast episode with just a few pointers on what we can do to practice being more vulnerable. The number one thing that we can do, Brené Brown says this herself, is to practice gratitude. When we wake up every day, what we can do is thank God for the day. We can thank the Creator for the day. We can thank the sun for coming out. We can thank the clouds for being here to water the earth so things continue to grow. We can be grateful, right? When we practice gratitude, it brings us closer to joy, so that we're not focused on the lack. So we're not focused on what is not there, but so we focus more on what is there, right? Another thing that we can do, these are my tips now, is to think before you speak. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad says to think 5 times before you say aloud what is in your mind, right? We need to think over what it is that we say, so that we know that it is truly worth saying, number one, and number two, that they're genuine and honest thoughts that are flowing from us into the world, because everything that we give is what we receive. So if we're just spurting out a bunch of nonsense, that is what our life is going to reflect, right? So when we think before we actually speak, we can be more intentional about the energy we put out. We can be more intentional about the words that we give to others, and therefore it will create a more peaceful, serene, and sane life around us. Another tip that I wanted to give you all is to sit in silence for 5 minutes, right? We can start with just 5 minutes for the day. Just sit in silence. How are we supposed to be vulnerable when we don't know what it is that we're feeling? We can't feel our true selves when we're constantly inundated by TV, by cell phones, by the clock that's ticking in here, by babies, by husband, by cooking, by doing our to-do list, right? If we're constantly inundated by things and doing, we are not really being ourselves, because we're allowing other things to push and pull us in the direction that they want us to be in, right? So take 5 minutes today, whenever you want to, and just sit in complete silence. No music, silence. That's a definitely good practice. And number 3, we can also write, right? We can write in a journal. We could write just a word, write an affirmation, whatever is most fitting to you on your notepad, on your phone. We can write. When we write, we're getting thoughts out in a different way. I know some people are more vocal, so they like to speak. However, for me, my best kind of thought vomit comes in a form of writing. When I'm able to write notes, when I'm able to write in my journal, I really kind of discover what it is that I'm thinking, and it's beneficial to me. Also, be honest with yourself. When you are about to do something, ask yourself why. This is like the entire basis for my life coaching and everything. When you're about to do something, why? Why are you doing it? When you're going to help somebody, why are you doing it? When you're about to cook, why are you cooking? Are you cooking just because you want to enjoy a meal, or are you cooking because you need to be nourished? When you're about to buy food, why are you buying food? Right? I have to ask myself this question because I often just buy food. And then I have to sit and ask myself, why am I buying out instead of cooking? I just bought groceries. When we get wrapped up in just doing things just to do it, right? I get angry and yell at somebody just because. That's not necessarily the best way to live. And lastly, my tip is to be present. Be in the now. At times we need to stop thinking about the future, the past, and just be present in the now, especially when it comes to joy, right? Especially when it comes to enjoying yourself more, you need to be present. I suffer from trying to go out of my presence, even when it comes to when I'm on vacation. I'm thinking about how stressful it's going to be in the airport to return from vacation instead of enjoying the beach that I'm on. And it sometimes it takes a practice when you've been out of it for a while. Sometimes it takes a real practice to be present and be in the now rather than being in the future and being in the past. These are my tips so that you can live a more wholehearted life, so that you can live and enjoy life a little more, and you can be more vulnerable and connected to yourself. Why should we do this? I want to end on this point because I believe there should be a purpose in everything that you do. So why would you want to be more vulnerable? When you are more vulnerable, right, in my perspective and understanding from just this small talk and my life experience, when you are more vulnerable, you are more connected with yourself. When you are more connected with yourself, you are more connected to the Creator, to Allah, to God. So in order for us to live a fulfilled life, a purposeful life, we need to be connected to ourselves, to our source, because that's our strength, that is our protection, that is our power, and that's how we manifest our dreams. I believe that we can all manifest our dreams, and it's because of the power that we're connected to, right? I'm not who I am just because of me. I'm who I am because I'm connected to my God. I'm who I am because I've taken time to realize what I was crafted and created to be here to do, right? We are all placed on this earth for a purpose, and the more vulnerable we are, the more in tune and connected we are to that frequency of purpose, right? So to me, a reason to live more vulnerably and to be more connected with the self is so that you can live within your purpose. If you are constantly trying to live in a way that just looks good on the outside, you're not connected with yourself. And you're not living within purpose. You're living within that scarcity culture that we talked about. That is what we are taught from the outside in, that external movement. We need to live more internally, move from the inside, because when we move from the inside, we're moving and living from our source rather than moving and living from what is limited, right? So that's what I have for you all today. I really do hope you enjoyed this episode on vulnerability. I hope you enjoyed this episode on joy as well. So if you did enjoy, definitely leave a comment wherever you were looking at this. If you are on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, set your alerts so you do not miss another episode of Tea Time Podcast or other videos on our channel by Atiya J. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you like, subscribe, review on Apple Podcasts, and let me know what you think. I would love some feedback. If you follow our Instagram, Tea Time Podcast, then go on and leave a comment about what this episode did for you. Was it purposeful to you? That's my biggest goal. I want to make sure that I'm accomplishing my goal of helping you discover your latent potential and your latent significance. So if this episode helps you to think about some things that will better your life, let me know in the comments. If there's feedback of things I can improve upon, let me know in the comments. I am here for you. I'm happy to listen. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tea Time Podcast. Peace.